In this video, we're going to be looking at how to sketch gradient functions. So one of the first things you need to realize is that gradient means the measure of steepness. Okay, so when you have a flat line, the gradient of that line is 0. So the gradient function of a flat line will also be a flat line, but going through 0, going through y equals 0. Okay, now if you have a straight line, so the gradient of a straight line is constant, so the gradient function will be a flat line. If you can work out the gradient, then you can draw exactly at the same point. Now you have to understand if the gradient, the function, original function is going up, it's a positive gradient, and if it's going down, it's negative. So if it is a line that's going up, then you must make sure that your gradient function is in the positive region. Now, if your line is going down, then you must make sure your gradient function is in the negative region. A parabola is going to give you a straight line, but it's not flat. Okay, now this will either be a straight line going with a positive gradient, or a straight line going in the negative with a negative gradient. So going this way, if it's a positive parabola, it's going to have a positive gradient. If it's a negative parabola, it's going to have a negative gradient. Now cubic will give you a parabola. Now if it's a positive cubic, you will have a positive parabola. If it's a negative cubic, you will have a negative parabola. Okay, now we're going to look at some examples and how to work them out. So here we have a straight line with a positive gradient. Now the reason we know it's positive is as we look at it left to right, it is going uphill. So therefore it's got a positive gradient. Now, I can also, if there are no numbers given, it's not so important, but I can see that the gradient of this line is, as we go up 1, or you can look at 2, it's going across 2. So the gradient of this line is 1 unit, 1 positive unit. So when I sketch my gradient function, so you can see this is y dash, and that's y. This is the original function, and this here is my gradient function. So what we are doing is drawing a flat line because the gradient is constant. It's increasing at a constant rate. So we are going to have a flat line in the positive region at 1. Now, if there are no numbers given, that's fine. You don't need to make sure it's exact. Now, please use a ruler and make sure you draw a nice flat line. Unfortunately, I don't have a ruler on the computer, so I can't do that. So there we have it. So if it is a straight line going uphill, it's going to be in the positive region. But if it was a straight line going downhill, remember, it will be in the negative region. Okay. Okay, this one we have a parabola. This is a negative parabola, so I know it's going to have a line sloping downwards. But the first thing we need to realize is the gradient at that point is 0. So I'm going to plot that to be 0. Okay, now over here I can see that I'm having to go uphill. So the gradient here is positive. And over here I'm having to go downhill, so the gradient here is negative. So the angle of the line doesn't matter. You just need to draw a line going through this point and sloping downwards with a negative gradient. So this is the key. It must map to the same x value, and the fact that it's sloping downwards is important. If your parabola was a positive parabola, then your line would need to be sloping up. Okay, so that's the key. Okay, in this one we've got a cubic, and we are going to sketch the gradient function for it. The first step is to work out where the turning points are. So there's one here and one here. So I'm going to dot it down and make sure it goes through the x-axis over there. And sorry, the line's not very straight, but roughly. So I'm going to make sure that my gradient function is going to go through the x-axis at those 2 points. Now, over here, my line is sloping downwards, so the gradient here is negative. And again, over here, the line is sloping downwards, so again, it's negative. If I look in the middle, the line is sloping upwards. So here, it's positive. So this point at 0, those 2 points at 0, but at other points, the gradient is either positive or negative. So when we're sketching our gradient function, so the first thing is to plot the 0 points, and then I know because it's a cubic, it's going to be a parabola. So this area is positive, so I'm going to do that. Now, how you draw it doesn't matter, as long as you make sure it's a negative parabola going through those 2 points. Just be aware that your parabola should look a lot tidier than this. Unfortunately, the tablet doesn't allow me to draw a nice smooth curve, but on paper and pencil you should be able to draw a nice smooth parabola, making sure it goes through those 0 points. And of course, if you had a positive cubic, then your parabola would be a positive parabola as well. So that's all there is to sketching gradient functions.